A brain tumor changed my life, but not more than my relationship with God, my wife, or my family. This is a podcast to change tomorrow while understanding today. On today's episode, we'll be starting off giving you just what the purpose of this podcast is all about, a little bit about myself, but also a study that suggests a dose of oxytocin can reduce romantic jealousy in both men and women. So let's get started. So you might be wondering, what is this podcast going to be about? Is it really worth my listening time? And I would say yes. Yes, only because I want to share stories and information with you that can truly change your life. And it happens by listening today, and then by changing tomorrow. So when I said this is a podcast of preparation, changing tomorrow while understanding today, while listening to this podcast, I'm hoping that you're going to be able to take information from it and not only apply it to your life tomorrow, but truly come to fully understand it. A lot of times we scroll so quickly through social media and through news headlines that we don't really read the nitty-gritty, the facts. We don't even follow up on stories. We just get the sensationalism of the moment. And so that's where my hope is for this podcast series, is to continue preparing you, to continue nurturing you, to continuing allowing you to grow so that you can go ahead and change. Because what we're doing is we're always looking for betterment. We're always looking for those opportunities to go ahead and to change our roles. For myself, I'm a husband, a father, a son, a Christian, an author, a podcaster, a national speaker. All these different roles that I take on, including my role of employment as a marriage and family therapist in Texas. I'm taking on all these different roles that if we lived in a vacuum, they wouldn't continue. We're looking for interdependence. We're looking at how to relate to others. And right now, in the midst of a pandemic, how well do we go ahead and interact with others? How well do we show the opportunities and the advancements of society to others? I would argue we're not. At first we were given the opportunity in this pandemic to pull back. Everything shut down. We were able to pull back and really try to find those things most important to us. Family, people, our time. Or were we just wasting away by scrolling? By truly not finding satisfaction, by pulling back into a shell and letting depression and anxieties and so much more affect our daily lives? Were we struggling with relationships with a spouse or a partner that had never happened before, but because of exposure, long-term exposure, isolated long-term exposure, we had opportunities, though, to change it. And that's where, by doing remote work as a therapist, it grew exponentially because so many people we're reaching out. And I've been doing podcasts, interviews, blogs for well over 10, 12, 13 years now. But I wanted to start this series, for another day, to truly change tomorrow. There's so much that we are learning right now about our brains, about our relationships. It's an exciting time for psychology and neuroscience and so much more. We're coming to really understand how everything works, when for so long it's been a mystery. So, with this podcast, I'm truly looking at how we can share and instruct, how we can learn and change, how we can grow. But I always want to include some little nugget of research, and not just something that you can scroll by and just briefly read, but something where we're going to dive deeper rather than just reading it, which we will, to really understand the nuances and what it really means and how it applies to your life. So most of all, I'm encouraging you, share, share, share. Share this podcast with others so that they too, you could have such a meaningful conversation around one of these podcast episodes. To really be able to break down and look at, how does it apply then to my life? And that's that preparation. And when we prepare for a trip to travel, we have to pack a bag. We have to put our toiletries in there and put our clothes in there and anything else we might need along the way. Sometimes we pack the same for a 2-night stay as long as a 7-night stay. We overpack. We don't know what to expect. But this podcast is truly an experience to prepare for what life will give you tomorrow. Now, of course, with a podcast, I'm not here to carry on a chat with someone else and pick their brains. But you get to listen to me, to be able to share with you. But if you do have questions, I would encourage you, whatever the platform is, respond to the polls, respond to the questions, respond to the comment sections. Do those things that you feel you would like to do to interact with me. Ask the questions that you haven't asked another person before. I might have a different opinion. I might have the same opinion of you. But I would love to be able to include so much of your lives here on this podcast and not just mine. Believe me, with over 20 years of experience working with people, it's one of those that there are many stories to be able to share. For you to laugh at, maybe cry at, but hopefully have reassurance that you're not alone. That this is a podcast for you. So I really hope that you go ahead and look for those new episodes that will come out on Tuesdays and Fridays. Listen to them at your leisure. But just know that they're there. This is a big investment of my time because it's just not in recording or editing, because I do it all, and in research. So if you can ever help us out to the fact of a one-time or a monthly donation, I appreciate that very much. Or even shopping through one of our affiliates, I appreciate that very much. Because once again, that pays the bills. That helps. And that helps so that I can go ahead and come to you to help facilitate change. So often, everyone wants to know about the podcaster's life, and this is difficult to say the least. Tell me briefly about yourself. It's a loaded question that really depends on so much. In business, they encourage you to have what's called an elevator statement, a short, concise statement that you could tell someone about yourself in a short one-floor ride in an elevator. Problem is, what is related? It depends so much on the person you encounter and where you encounter them. It could be in a ritzy, expensive office building with a gray-haired man in a suit, or it could be a young, athletic dog walker in your own residential building that you have seen before. So selling myself for an internet audience who I've never met before is so tough. So to tell someone I have been counseling people since 2000, people might expect an academic. But then when I tell them I've worked on installing HVAC or air conditioning systems, then their curiosity peaks. I mean, when I share with them that I was an author and a national speaker on parenting teenagers, yet was also a children's, youth, and young adult minister, those seem to fit better. My diversity of experiences definitely gives me so much knowledge that I really want to share with each and every one of you each day. But it's in the encounters. It's the stories with the people that I have met on my lifetime that hopefully will keep you coming back episode after episode to hear more. Listening each week, and I'm sure you're going to come to know me even better. And I look forward to interacting with the listeners through questions and chats and polls and so much more. So, yes, my favorite color is red. Yes, I am married. Favorite animal? Raccoon. Favorite job? Online counseling. Am I a Christian? Yes. Beach or mountain retreat or vacations? Definitely the beach. Favorite fast food? Well, I'd have to be asking, is this gluten-free? Favorite 80s movie? Well, of course it would be Star Wars. First concert, music concert, Charlie Daniels. Number of states visited, 43. And do I have a pet? Yes, it's a poodle. So all things to come to understand and to be comfortable with the person behind the mic. Real dark chocolate and pretzel protein bars that both taste great and nourish us. Nugo offers so many types of bars and cookies for your enjoyment, but I always stick with the best. Plus, it's gluten-free. Click the link below to order yours today. Okay, so the headline reads, A dose of oxytocin can reduce romantic jealousy in both men and women. Okay, so if we take a step back first, this comes out of the Journal of Psychopharmacology. It was first published in February 18th, 2021. Um, and it's coming out of, I have a link in the show notes from SciPost. That is from December 8th, 2021, when they finally were able to post it up. I refer a lot to SciPost just because they have a good breakdown of the information to be able to read rather than it coming straight from the journal articles. But I'm going to break it down even more than what is at hand on the website. Okay. So let's take a step back again and kind of come to an understanding here that oxytocin, okay, that neuropeptide, this is what they are studying. Now, if you don't know what a neuropeptide is, we might need to take a step back even further. And you can go ahead and Google this or search it anywhere on the internet. But oxytocin is mainly produced in the hypothalamus, which is kind of towards that center brain area, and it releases into the blood via the pituitary gland. Now, I start this one off with interest because just a month and a half ago, suddenly at the age of 47, rushed by ambulance and EMS to the hospital, and come to find out I had a pituitary tumor. And it was affecting my sight, in my left eye. It was affecting some of my thoughts or cognitions. It was affecting me being able to even walk. And so this is one of those that I thought, well, this would be a good place to start with. So this oxytocin is released by the hypothalamus, let go by the pituitary gland and other areas. You know, it can come out in other parts of the brain. It can come out even in the spinal cord. And it binds to oxytocin receptors. And this is what influences, behavior and psychology. And a lot of excitement started coming out when they really started understanding oxytocin in the 1990s. It was one of those that showed promise, and they tried to understand what type of emotions, what type of bonding does it truly induce? Because a lot of times you'll hear about oxytocin and breastfeeding, and then that bonding and that innate bonding experience. But here, researchers are really trying to probe that if you took an intranasal dose, so like a nose spray, up your nose with oxytocin, what can that do for these different types of feelings of both trust and generosity? These really have exploded because they're able to administer very metered or regulated dosages up the nasal cavity, which are easily absorbed into the bloodstream, and they're also right there next to the pituitary. I didn't know this until I went in for surgery. They went up my nose with the tubes to be able to drill little tiny holes into my brain cavity to get to the tumor. And so it was one of those that the pituitary is right there. So this absorption of oxytocin can truly help, can truly change, can truly do so much. And so that's where now they're looking at how does it affect behavior? How do these hormones rise in children, but then they're not the same in adoptive children? How secure do you form relationships under them? How does it happen under stress? And there's so much research right now involved in oxytocin. So this research here is looking at strengthening and promoting a romantic bond. Because if you didn't have jealousy, then the other side of the pendulum that swings should be about strengthening that romantic bond. It says here, jealousy is widely experienced emotion in romantic relationships and can result even in domestic violence and breakups. In extreme cases, romantic jealousy can become a pathological, leading to morbid conditions that they called the Othello syndrome. So there really hasn't been that much research done in terms of jealousy and ways to reduce jealousy. So the oxytocin sometimes is also referred to as the love hormone, but it's important in those bonds, like I said, not just parental bonds, but also bonds between couples. So as you have this relationship and as oxytocin goes ahead and is produced, that bond is increased. It's increased. So by having multiple partners, there is studies that are suggesting that there could be difficulties with the oxytocin neurons and receptors for production. Still more research to be done. So what did they do to figure this all out, right? And this is the part where you really start breaking it down, because it was like, what type of a population do you find? And I think we've learned that immensely through the pandemic of the past few years, because sensational headlines will come across news and across our phones like crazy. But when you truly open it, look at the research, sometimes it will say an N of 12. N is your population. This is the amount of people that was in a study. When you have an N of 12, that is a very small population, right? And so you want to start looking for, typically, unless you're looking at, a great first paper on a new innovative research. But this is, we're looking at a study of 70 heterosexual couples in a stable, intimate relationship. The participants first completed a set of validated psychological assessments. So they sat down that would give them these tests or these assessments for their psychological health. They were then randomly assigned to receive either the oxytocin dose or a placebo. So this was intranasal. So one had the true oxytocin and the other control group had a placebo or just a fake nose spray that they would go ahead and use. Because when it comes down to it, if you just said, oh, you're the control group, you're fine, we'll do this test at the end. If you're not doing the exact same type, You have psychological bias. You have a placebo effect. So, by them not knowing who has the placebo and who has the oxytocin, it helps in that research. So, after they had a dose of the oxytocin or the placebo, they then completed two related tasks in the lab. Okay, so one task involved imagining their partner committing various acts of emotional or sexual infidelity and then rating their emotional reaction. Okay. The other task, the participants were asked to play a virtual cyberball game with their partner and a stranger. But unbeknownst to the participants, the game was pre programmed to have a scenario that designed to evoke jealousy by systematically excluding them while the person they believed to be their partner and the stranger played together. Okay, so let's break this down again. So the first one, they asked for emotionality, right? They said, imagine, get those neurons sparking in the brain for those areas. And it's like, what would emotional or sexual infidelity be like? And then they rated that emotional response. But the second part was when they played a cyberball game, virtual, right? There was that third person or the stranger. Well, the third person allied with the other partner. So let's say husband and wife playing, husband is playing. Suddenly the stranger is allying and pitting against the husband with the wife. So they're teaming up, winning points. They're teaming up to make him lose. They're teaming up against him. And it varied upon, which one that they were advocating. And then they went ahead and looked at what happens in terms of that emotional reaction. In both tasks, though, they found that participants who received the oxytocin tended to report feeling less jealous compared to those that did not. So in that control study, or the placebo ones, they had a higher response of jealousy. And they said, this is just a first evidence in our study, but there's so much more that still needs to be happening. It's like, what about in the context of infidelity? And so that's where they want to do more research, further research. But it does support here that oxytocin helps maintain romantic bonds. But there's also a therapeutic application here. A therapeutic application of, if you had been a spouse, an ex-spouse, that's been cheated on 6 times, that you have jealousy of your newest partner, what is the applications that this could be then used for this new trusting partner that hasn't cheated, that hasn't had infidelity? Could it make a difference? Could it make a difference in that bonding experience? But the findings were also in line with previous neuroimaging studies. So neuroimaging, taking a picture of the brain and where the activity happens, typically in a functional MRI. So an MRI, typically, you go in the tube and it takes a picture of your brain, all in little slices. It puts it together in the computer, and there you have the image, or you have the image of like the tumor in my brain that they hopefully got out, all of it. But the functional MRI continually takes pictures, and so it can show the activity in the brain. And in the neuroimaging studies, they found that the oxytocin reduced activation in the anterior cingulate cortex when imagining infidelity. So, anterior front, the cingulate cortex. Hopefully, you can go online and type that in so you can see what part of the brain that is. Cortex is the outside of the brain, not the inner brain, but the outside. That's our higher order thinking brain. Okay. Now, this is important because, this part of the brain, this is where we ask teenagers lots of in psychological assessments for functionality tests. They found that that part of the brain doesn't continue, it continues to grow until the age of 25 at an exponential rate. Our brain never stops. We never just stop brain growth. We're always doing new things and experiencing new things and changing our brain's chemistry and our brain's connections. But this expanded growth, just like when they were infants, up until 25, this is the part that continues to grow at a rapid pace. This is why car insurance is not cheap for those under 25. It's our higher order thinking, our decision making, but also here it lowers when you imagine infidelity. So, what they're truly looking at, like I said, is there a possibility that an intranasal administration of oxytocin could be used to treat pathological jealousy? But this is just the beginning. So, what do you think? I'd be interested to know your comments in the comment section down below. Is this going too far? Is this wrong to be able to administer a drug up your nose, a hormone up your nose, to be able to change feelings towards another partner? There are some serious ethical considerations that are there that will always be there, whether it's with regular drug treatment or something else. So it's another consideration to be made. Because some people, like it said in here, some people are more prone to jealousy than others. And do you want them to have always negative experiences when it comes to attachment or love attitudes? I mean, it's something to consider. So each time on this podcast, I'm going to be exploring a topic just like today, to be able to say, truly, does a dose of oxytocin reduce romantic jealousy in both men and women? Can it make a difference? So, I wanted to leave you with this closing today.